This is a bit of a departure from what I normally do, but I went on a trip to Fort Ticonderoga with my dad and I filmed some of the things that we saw. I figured I would make a little movie on them and upload them to the channel with some kind of intermittent commentary from me. But for the most part, I thought it would just be nice to see the scenery in the fort and kind of the things we saw as we went on our trip. What you're about to see is Mount Independence. This used to be part of the fort complex and there was a wooden bridge going from it to Fort Ticonderoga. The fort there was destroyed by the British when they evacuated back to Canada. And now what's going to come up is something called Mount Defiance. 2 cannons were placed here and they were fired down upon by the British on the American colonists in Fort Ticonderoga. Those 2 shots would convince the colonists to evacuate Fort Ticonderoga, where those forces would eventually sneak back into Saratoga, which that battle would lead to the defeat of the British and eventually the entry of France into the war. These here are the trophy gardens. Now this was put in by the family whose name escapes me right now, but when they eventually took over the site back in the late 1800s or early 1800s, I can't really remember, they would eventually put in these gardens and they would bring in exotic flowers from all across the world. They're open up today and you can go through them and see the different plants, and there are different names on them, but I'm not a botanist so I can't exactly say what they are. But either way, it was kind of a cool part of the trip and we got to see a little bit more of the modern stuff along with the ancient fort. The videos that I took were intermittent throughout the day. Normally I don't really pull out my phone because I try to be more in the moment to see things with my own eyes rather than through my camera. But these videos I did take upon my approach to the fort. What you're seeing right now are the outer walls of the fort, and these were put up by the colonists. These aren't the original walls, they would eventually be put up by the family who owned the fort later on in the 1800s. They took on this huge restoration project and looked through blueprints and as much of the natural material that was still left after the British exploded the fort upon their retreat. The museum and the people who run it do a really good job of kind of putting you in the moment, and there are all these different things that probably would have been native to the fort. These guns, which would be mortars, cannons, and another type of artillery that I can't really remember, should have been around the fort around 1775, I believe. When you go into the fort, they have these buildings. These are in the original sites, as far as I know, of what was actually there at the fort. One of the buildings was just a bunch of ruins, and then they took the blueprints of that one and rebuilt it back up. It was a really neat trip overall. And I think that's probably the best part, which is going to come up later in the video, was the live firing exercise with the cannons. If you ever get the chance to go to Fort Ticonderoga, I do highly recommend it. There's so much to see. My dad and I were there for about 5 hours and we still didn't really get into everything. We did get into a vast majority of it with the boat tour, the drum and fife exercises, and a couple of the different exhibits that they had on during the day. Again, I didn't take videos of everything, so I'd recommend going there. The last thing I'll say is that these guys, who I'm pretty sure were all college age or high school age, must have been a summer job or something, they did a really great job. The guy in the blue coat was fantastic. He was really into it. He may have tripped over his words, but you could tell he was really trying to put you back into the scene of what would have been taking place. Fantastic job by him. And I don't usually do this, but if you did like the video, I wanted to thank you all for watching, for liking it, and the channel is kind of growing up really quickly, so I wanted to thank you all, and I really appreciate it.